Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, long-serving Montgomery County State's Attorney John McCarthy must fend off two challengers. 6,000 Montgomery County renters seek rent assistance. Will there be an eviction tsunami after August 15th when the moratorium expires? Former Labor Secretary Tom Perez enters the crowded field for governor. The county plans an ambitious climate action plan. And Carl Nassib comes out, but he's not the first gay player in the NFL or even in Washington. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by attorney Ron Little and Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. On Wednesday, County Executive Mark Elrich announced a climate action plan, which he described as one of the most ambitious in the nation. Among the recommendations are reduced emissions in the energy, building, and transportation sectors, address residual emissions and carbon sequestration, reduce climate risks, identify ways to pay for climate action, enhance climate governance, engage the community as partners in climate action, and create a Center for Racial Equity and Social Justice. Mark, it shouldn't be a surprise that a progressive leader, as County Executive Mark Elrich is, and the majority of the County Council are, that this plan was adopted to address the existential threat that climate change poses. Nonetheless, the announcement seems long on platitudes and deficient on specifics. What's your perspective?
Well, I think it's really important to be sort of honest and candid about what the consequences of these policy trade-offs are. The difference in electric prices between those jurisdictions that have gone down high levels of renewable requirements and those that haven't typically is about $1,000 per year per household. And again, it makes sense if you go through all the numbers on that. And what's frequently frustrating about it is the lack of candor, the fact that this will affect people in their wallets and it'll hit them with higher costs.
Well, not only affect people with higher costs, but also with some inconveniences. I mean, we're talking about expanding bike and pedestrian lanes. And for example, the other day the county executive had a photo opportunity out here on Woodglen Avenue, which is right by my office. Now they've got bike lanes that extend into the middle of the roadway, and I know that transportation is impacted by that, and maybe one bike an hour goes down that bike lane. So there are other human costs and social costs besides just financial that we have to be aware of. But Ron, it's been almost 15 years since Al Gore published his doomsday environmental prophecy, An Inconvenient Truth. And a climate denier, and I admit I am a skeptic, might say that the world hasn't gone to hell in a handbasket. So does climate change really possess or pose the existential threat that progressives profess?
Yeah, I beg to differ on whether or not we've gone to hell in a handbasket. At least given the past 4 years, there have been certainly signs that we're on a somewhat wayward path. But I think the reality is clear to everyone. We do have some climate impacts that we can't control any longer: polar ice cap melting and other environmental impacts that affect breathing. There are countries around the world that suffer from unbelievable amounts of smog, and those consumers or people in those environments are forced to wear masks or do other things to mitigate their ability to breathe clean air. We've already seen how Americans respond to an ask to wear masks for health reasons. So I think the next best effort for us would be to do what we can to reduce health impacts that I think are not discussed often enough, but are a major consideration.
But it's not like we haven't had improvements in our quality of living in our environment. I mean, good gracious, when I was a child, we had smog alerts, and I marched on the first Earth Day because the environment was so dirty. We had the Potomac River was polluted. I mean, we certainly had a cause for concern. The question is, when we talk about incremental costs that are going to affect everybody in Montgomery County, we can't solve the problems in the third world because they have bad air. If China is burning coal that causes air pollution, we can't solve it. China can solve it, but we can't.
But and to add to that, that American CO2 emissions have been going down over the last 10, 15 years, primarily because of the transition to natural gas, which is that much more efficient than the coal that had been more the dominant fuel. But you put your finger right on it, which is if we give China a pass on this, in fact, Americans are making extraordinary sacrifices, and Europeans, but the consequences to the global climate will be minimal if China continues to, build coal plants the way they're planning to do through 2050.
Well, I'm concerned about some of the other specifics in the proposal. We're talking about converting all of our vehicles from, school buses and ride-on buses to electric vehicles. And Ron, there is a study that was published in 2018, written by Jonathan Lesser, and that was published in Politico, and it found that widespread adoption of electric vehicles nationwide will likely increase air pollution compared with new internal combustion vehicles. And the more, you read that right, more electric vehicles and trucks mean more air pollution. So have we fully vetted these things? I mean, I think the intelligentsia adopts these stories and they become urban legends, and they aren't supported by facts.
I think what the problem is that we're not looking at it from a totality of circumstances perspective. Yet, I mean, we do have some emissions issues that need to be addressed, but we don't talk about the particle impacts as well. So it's not just one area of renewable energy versus coal versus gas. We have to look at the total impact of everything and identifying one metric and saying this is why this isn't going to be as effective as not changing our course of action doesn't reconcile.
Well, I understand that, but if you look at the totality, as you say, we look at the totality, the pollution associated with electric vehicles is understated. I mean, the mining of cobalt, the mining of copper, the human toll, because the two primary locations where both those elements are mined is the Congo and in China. There are human costs to that, as well as the disposal costs. These cobalt batteries are almost as bad as nuclear waste, and trying to dispose of them. So I think we're glossing over some of the threat, as well as, while we're looking for a solution.
It's a trade-off, Casey, and in order to make progress, we have to figure out ways to solve the new problems that we create. And if we're not going to be a walking community, we're going to have to figure out ways to mitigate our need for transportation and how to use it without affecting our environment.
Well, we're a big country, and we're not just small communities any longer. And back you're not riding your horse 10 miles to go to the country store. So I mean, we need realistic solutions, not pie in the sky solutions. We got to go on though, because there's an important date looming, and that's August 15th. And according to the county, 6,600 individuals have applied for rent assistance due to an inability to pay their rent on their apartments and homes resulting from COVID. And Ron, Governor Hogan's order ending the COVID emergency will allow residential evictions, which have been suspended, to proceed again on August 15th. Well, it's actually August 16th because August 15th is a Sunday. Is there going to be a tsunami of evictions as a result?
Yeah, I think so. I think Governor Hogan's measure was quite premature. While we may be coming out of recovery in terms of how many of our constituents, our residents, citizens in the state and across the country have been vaccinated, we're still in a need to recover economically. People haven't returned to work yet to the same effect that they've been working in the past, and unleashing the furor, so to speak, on our court system with renters and landlords and evictions is not going to help anyone anytime soon. We really need to focus on getting everyone back to work and reestablishing our economy to a healthy level before we consider measures like that.
Well, you know, the non-payment of rent cases have gone forward, even though the moratorium on evictions have occurred.
Mm-hmm.
So where you're going to see the impact is in the sheriff's office, who has to enforce those evictions. It's, you know, the courts have actually been processing non-payment and repossession cases unabated. So the only thing is that the sheriff hasn't been able to evict them. But Mark, here's a unique attitude that the state of California has announced, which is that it would use its COVID relief funds to pay 100% of all rent lost, residential rent, not commercial, lost due to COVID. Should Maryland do the same?
Well, I was going to make the observation. I mean, the data, I can't do Maryland or California, but the data nationwide shows that the arrearages from rents, comparing 2019, which is obviously pre-COVID and currently, are really not as high as you would have thought. They're only sort of not quite twice as high as a percentage as the pre-COVID. So I'm not sure that you can attribute all of those rent relief cases to COVID. Since it's kind of a reflection of what happens normally in the marketplace. I think you really need to make kind of a case-by-case assessment. Where there's hardships, there's certainly an opportunity for the courts to respond to that, but I'm not sure you want to do that in a blanket. I'd point out that this relief is only applying to renters, so homeowners aren't getting any relief from Montgomery County on property taxes that were due last December. And so there are other folks who are also dealing with hardships. And I think we really want to do as a general principle, apply what relief we have to the folks that are most in need.
Well, if there's almost 7,000 people looking for rental assistance, you know that, I mean, in a county, even though we're a county of 1.5 million, that's still a significant number of people who are going to be impacted and potentially have to.
It's under 1%. I mean, obviously household numbers are a little different, but it's still, yeah.
It's 1% unless you're the guy being thrown out.
Right? Absolutely. And I think that's the whole point of really making an assessment on it's more targeted rather than.
Well, I will, I'm very critical of the county. But I think in this instance, the county is doing a great job in trying to find ways to assist people who are in need. When we come back from this short break, do you know who was the first known gay player on the Washington football team? Stay tuned to find out. And welcome back. Mark, in the past week, 2 more candidates for governor have filed and announced in the Democratic field. Nonprofit executive John Barron and former Secretary of Labor and former DNC Chairman Tom Perez. What do you make of the contestants that include current Comptroller Peter Franchot, former Prince George's County Executive Rashawn Baker, former Education Secretary John King, former Attorney General Doug Gansler, philanthropist Wes Moore, now Barron, now Perez? Pretty impressive list. What do you make of them?
It's a long, complicated list. I mean, obviously, among people who followed Maryland politics, Rashawn Baker and Peter Franchot are sort of paid their dues and have been active public figures. And I would generally think that would give them a leg up. Where obviously we saw somebody who won the Democratic primary 3 years ago who hadn't been elected official. But I would still think that Baker and Franchot would be the strongest contender. But I'll defer to Ron on whether or not that makes sense or not.
Well, Ron, the same question. And I don't want you to be put in a position where you're given an endorsement. I mean, but what is your assessment of the race so far?
You know, I like to think that any endorsement, if one is ever made by me, would happen after the filing deadline is closed. So I think there'll be a couple more people that identify themselves as contenders. But I think what historically we need to be conscientious of is that for our gubernatorial races, Maryland appears to be more purple than blue or red. We also have to be cognizant of Tom Perez's contributions to the state of Maryland are pretty extensive as well. He has a history here in the state, and as a former member of the Obama administration's cabinet, may have some additional support that has not yet made itself clear. So I think once the race deadline closes and we see who the active players are and how the lieutenant governor's choices line up, we'll have a clear victor at that point. Maryland, Montgomery County, Howard County, Prince George's County, all typically have frontline contenders for these gubernatorial races. So at a minimum, it's going to be fun. Spending will be wild, and we should have a pretty thorough and informed race from the Democrat.
But I think what's really notable is that at least four of the candidates are from Montgomery County.
Yes.
And we really don't have a Baltimore County candidate running. So you've seen the power shift, dramatically from Baltimore County and Baltimore City to Montgomery County and Prince George's.
It's still early.
Too early?
It's still early. It's still early. I think ducks are being lined up and people trying to shake out who's going to be the best representative from that jurisdiction. And I think we'll have another candidate in another week or so.
And the Baltimore Sun editorial page will not like Montgomery County having its dibs.
Long and
they don't even
battle.
cover Montgomery County in the Baltimore Sun. It's pathetic. I read the Sun every day. Maybe one line a week about Montgomery County. But Mark, let me ask you something. Without giving your endorsement, there are two Republicans running, or at least have announced. Will there be more? And which one is the strongest right now?
Well, I think Kelly Schultz has really inherited the mantle of the sort of Larry Hogan. Is probably without question the strongest candidate. Obviously, Robert Ficker is running as well, but the elected officials and others, finance people, are really coalescing around Kelly Schultz's campaign, and she is running in tandem with Barry Glassman, who's a county executive who is running what could be a very competitive race for controller.
Well, the question always is, even though 2 out of the last 3 governors have been Republican, is the difficulty in winning a statewide election. And it really depends on who emerges from the Democratic primary. So I want to go on to a local election that's of great importance, which is Montgomery County State's Attorney John McCarthy has filed to run for his 5th term in office. This doesn't seem possible. But unlike other election contests, he's now facing stiff competition from former Montgomery County Bar President Tom DeGonia, and Silver Spring attorney Bernice Maricoux North. Ron, what can you tell us about these two candidates?
I don't know Ms. Maricoux North at all, but she has quite an impressive resume as a prosecutor, and happily and locally Howard University graduate, for those who follow those kinds of things. Tom, I've known for quite some time, and it does not surprise me that John is facing a challenge now. There have been rumblings the past couple of elections about challenging John. I think the person who comes out of this race as the front runner is likely to be the one who can address or present a platform that addresses the needs that serve the state's attorney's office. You know, a balance of prosecutions and how we handle prosecutions, youth entanglement in law and eliminating the school to prison pipeline. What are we going to do about police and enforcement and addressing the concerns that citizens in the county have? So I think it is going to be a very progressive approach in this race in particular. And like many others, I expect another candidate to come forth and to be a fourth in that race. And again, it's going to be quite interesting, and we'll see a very progressive and active campaign for that.
Well, you look at both the platforms of Begonia and Miss Maricopa North. They both seem to be very much on the new social justice platform, questioning arrests and prosecution. I'm not sure Montgomery County, in terms of its judicial philosophy, is as liberal as that. But it'll be interesting to see, if it meets the same kind of profile as we've seen in other jurisdictions. Certainly Philadelphia. I mean, this could be a very high-profile election in that regard.
I think it will be. I think those championing newer social justice approaches are going to be very loud and very vocal. I think we're going to have to continue to address the police unions' active participation in keeping certain officers active and working within a department. So efforts that were made at the state level to address some of those concerns are going to further trickle down, and we're going to have to make some efforts to reconcile at the local level as well. So it's going to be fun. I mean, these races are always fun. You want to see who can strike the greater balance between serving the justice side and serving the people's side.
Mark, forgive me for not knowing this. Is this this is a partisan position?
This is a partisan race. In fact, in the past, one of our frequent panelists over the years, Jim Shallak, has run for prosecutor. I will say, I mean, I think what the race that's set up is John McCarthy is a more traditional prosecutor, and nationally, as you referenced, in a number of very large jurisdictions, such as Philadelphia, but also Baltimore City, there has been a concerted national effort, without getting into all the details, to elect prosecutors that have tried to do basically a 180. I will tell you, the results are very much mixed for this group, and it'll be interesting to see, for example, the results in New York City, where what we're seeing in the Democratic primary could be reflect a real rejection of that particular this sort of woke approach to prosecution.
Well, we're gonna be on the front line and watch this. This is
right.
an interesting presentation, because John has been really unchallenged in the last several elections. I'm going to go on to our last topic for the day, and that is, this week, Las Vegas Raider football player Carl Nassib announced that he was openly gay. Now, Mark, it's surprising still in 2021 that the announcement that a prominent person is openly gay is still treated as a major headline.
It is surprising, but I guess it's endorsements and all these other considerations that tie into it that folks at least have been reluctant to do that. I was surprised that they hadn't come out before, but I guess that's the case.
Well, I guess I'm surprised they're not more openly gay
football
players.
Yeah,
really. Ron, one of my all-time favorite Washington football players was tight end Jerry Smith, whose homosexuality was learned only when he tragically died of AIDS in 1986. And I guess the same, incredulity is, haven't we advanced as a society in accepting the gay community?
But absolutely not. I think that we have quite a few unaddressed problems that we hear about daily on the news, attacks against people in the lesbian, gay, bisexual, community. We have isolation issues and mental health issues that don't get concerned. We have issues in the workplace. We have facilities usage issues that are often scorned when talked about. We are not yet in a place where people can openly express their sexuality and not suffer some public backlash, in particular with athletes who to some degree rely on their ability to sell jerseys as part of their contracts or some other portion of their income. We have a long way to go.
Well, but there was a run on Nassib's jersey when he came out and announced. There was a spike in sales. So, maybe we're looking at a situation where we're going to come to some kind of resolution. Anyway, I agree. Sports is a tough area when we're dealing with this topic. Stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from the short break. Now with parting shots, Ron Little.
I have a shout out for all of the small local business owners who have endeavored to try to keep as many staff members on board during the last year and a half's crises. And I am excited to see all of them opening up restaurants and inviting people back in with some of our restrictions lifted. We have an opportunity to support our neighbors in every way possible. So my shout out is to every small business owner who has done their part to try to keep families together.
Thank you, Ron. Mark Uncapher, your parting shot.
Well, I know we talk about Save the Bay, but I was surprised to see a father and son last weekend where he found a 7.5-foot alligator in Calvert County off in the Chesapeake Bay. So again, I don't know what that says about global warming in the Chesapeake, but apparently Floridians are also coming up to Maryland.
We have a reverse migration.
Migration.
Just the alligators. The
Don't
gators
want
are
those
coming.
residents, though.
All right, guys, I want to thank you for being here. Terrific discussion on some tough topics. I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.